Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Ketogenic Fasting Project. Today I'm doing another book review. This book, I think I just happened to come across it on Audible or maybe on Amazon. So I downloaded it and listened to it, and I gotta say it's a very powerful book. I had not heard of Dr. Boz before, to be honest with you, but she has quite a presence online, so she's easy to get to know. And the story in this book is very powerful. So I encourage people to check it out. I'll give you an idea of what's in it, though. As you can see here on YouTube, she has quite a few videos. She does these short videos where she kind of breaks down the different aspects of the ketogenic diet. And yeah, I don't want to confuse anybody. I'm a full-time carnivore, but I still give a lot of love to the ketogenic world because ketogenics is really good to me, and it pretty much parallels the carnivore diet or carnivore way of eating. It's funny how people get so particular about how you describe things. If I call it a diet, then people go, "Well, it's really a way of eating," which I've said that myself, so I don't want to be too critical, but I think people know in general what you mean. It's neither one of them really need to be temporary. People do them full time. People sometimes, if they're athletes or they have a certain goal in mind, they may cycle in and out of a ketogenic diet. They may supplement with carbohydrates to enhance certain types of performance because some people want to recharge their glycogen stores in their muscles faster or something like that. And of course, people will fast for different reasons. So, anyways, I think there's a strong parallel between the carnivore diet and the ketogenic diet, and I think the ketogenic diet is going to be a gateway for a lot of people who move to the carnivore diet. So I'm going to continue to cover both as much as possible. I look at all this as a learning process and an experiment. I mean, ketogenic kind of led me to the carnivore diet, and I meet a lot of other people online that have the same experience. And Dr. Boss has a lot of great videos to help people, and her book is great. And there's quite a few others, and I've done some other book reviews, and I have plenty more I'd like to do. But there's not as many books on carnivore diet, and really a lot of the information that's out there wasn't necessarily written recently. So I know there's books coming out. I know like Dr. Sean Baker has a book coming out before too long. You can pre-order it on Amazon. I don't know if there's going to be an audio version, but I may try and get in touch with him and ask if he's going to do an audio book because that would be great for people like me. And that's another thing, I like to share the media that people can use other than just reading a print copy book. Because if you're like me, reading a print copy just takes forever, and you can't leverage your time like when you're sitting in traffic or you're gardening or whatever you get to working on the car. You can listen to an audiobook when you're doing stuff like that. So this is a glimpse of what's inside to give you some idea what the table of contents is like. This book sort of centers around Dr. Boz's experience of taking care of her mother who's had cancer for a very long time. And she actually gets the inspiration to look into the ketogenic diet from a patient who heard about it and who kind of sheepishly asked the doctor about it, Dr. Boz. And she had a researcher that looked up a lot of her initial data, and she was very, very taken back by how much data is out there that she'd never heard of. In particular, I went to the MD Anderson website to see, and they're very cautious about the ketogenic diet on their um, website, but they do put particularly brain cancer patients on a ketogenic diet, and they do much better. So, anyway, something to look into the future for sure. But Dr. Boz needed this diet to help her mother, so she put herself on it, her dad on it, and the rest of her family, I believe. And so she has a very personal experience um, in coaching her family and getting them through this, as well as her mom is basically, or Grandma Rose, as she's called in the book, is having a health crisis that's, the culmination of 20 years of fighting cancer. So she explains a lot how the different mechanisms are affected by the ketogenic diet and why it's beneficial. And even with a mother, a frail 70-some-year-old mother who's being overwhelmed by cancer and chemo and radiation, why a diet change like this probably saved her life and certainly improved her standard of living, or her quality of life. I gotta warn you that this book is a bit graphic. It's not for the squeamish. There's a lot of biology. There's a lot of humanity in this book. So it's pretty much no holds barred when it comes to the physical aspects of dealing with a cancer and what can happen to the human body. So be prepared. Be prepared to meet Squirt and all the things that come before Squirt, because you might pause when you hit that part of the book. So anyways, here's a sample of how the book starts, give you some idea of what the writing style is like. Of course, I listened to it. I didn't read it as usual. There's not just a detailed description of the cancer and what's going on in her mom's body, but also how to manage glucose, how to get started on the diet, a lot of the mistakes people make when they begin a ketogenic diet, and some people lose weight right away and some people don't. She makes a point that, like heavy whipping cream, they love a lot of heavy whipping cream when they're drinking it, and a lot of butter. And her and her mom weren't really losing weight, but her dad uh, didn't pack in quite as much fat, and he started losing weight right away. So there's a great video that they did live. This is Dr. Boz and her mom just recently. I'm recording this on October 12th, and I think this came out on October 10th. So it was just a couple days ago. Just talking about the book, and her mom's talking about her personal experience. A lot of other videos from Dr. Boz are much more instructional, but this is kind of like a heart-to-heart about the experience with her mom. It was a very touching video. So anyways, I highly recommend it. Check them out. Get inspired, and obviously learn something. I think this is really valuable information that'll help a lot of people with a lot of different health conditions. So the book covers a lot of the diverse applications of the ketogenic diet, not just how it pertains to cancer, not just the Warburg effect, but she does talk about that a lot, of course, because this kind of focuses on her mom's health and her mom's battling cancer. So since I've read a lot of books or listened to a lot of books on the subject, I don't necessarily expect to find a lot of new information. But one of the things that I always wondered was why does every book make this critical distinction between ketoacidosis and let's say a regular keto state of ketosis, or dietary ketosis. So as Dr. Boz explains it, her only experience with ketone talk, ketogenic state or anything was in her training, and she recounts a patient that came into the ER, I believe was already in a coma. It was a type 1 diabetic who'd been over using the insulin and was in a state of ketoacidosis in a coma, a very dangerous state. And that's the limited experience that most health practitioners have with ketogenic. So they don't realize that a nutritional state of ketosis or a clinical state of ketosis is nothing like ketoacidosis. I know I've run into this talking to people. So the whole thing of a ketogenic diet is really just outside the experience, and so naturally people relate it to whatever similar sounding sort of experience they have. So that kind of cleared that up, made that a little make a little more sense, because I don't talk about it a lot because it's like in every book I read. So I figure people are, if they're the least bit interested, they're going to come across it. So um, the the Dr. Boss, since she treats a lot of other patients, is able to relate how to introduce people to the concepts pretty well in the book. I know one of the things she mentioned that I hadn't heard before was about a mortality study. So you'll frequently read in the books about how the ketogenic diet was commonly prescribed to especially epileptic children before anti-seizure medications were available, so probably around the turn of the century, like 1900 or so. And it was the only method they had for arresting the seizures. And I think it was another interview where one of the doctors was saying that 10% of those kids needed no other medication as long as they stayed on a ketogenic diet, which typically I guess people with epilepsy need more than one medication oftentimes, especially if they're having seizures every day. So to get 10% of your patients off of all meds is a remarkable thing. But later on, they found patients that didn't respond to any medications. And so those people were placed on ketogenic diets in the 50s and the 60s. And then apparently there was a very rare mortality study done. I guess mortality studies are relatively unusual. And as these people began to die decades later from other causes, they were thoroughly autopsied. And it was discovered that these people had nearly perfect brains, which is very unusual for anyone with a seizure disorder. Apparently, most people with seizure disorders have some very apparent changes to the brain, like neural tangles and whatnot. And for the people that lived on the ketogenic diet, this was not the case, which was pretty remarkable. And also that the patients had no signs of cancer. So to have a group of people with no signs of cancer is unusual as well, because as we've come to understand, almost everybody has cancer in their body all the time, and it's usually very small, and your immune system deals with it, and it goes away. And of course, it's when your body can't fight the cancer on its own that it becomes a problem. So there's a very powerful suggestion that the ketogenic diet not only is optimal for brain health, but it's also optimal for avoiding cancer. And of course, I like to mention that about fasting as well. Fasting and autophagy might be one of the most powerful tools we have to fight cancer, especially since we've been led to believe all this time that, like, if you eat red meat, it's going to give you cancer or something like that. Meat gives you cancer or whatever. It's still here. It said that fat causes diabetes or meat causes diabetes, which apparently there is no study that proves that. There's always studies that suggest things, and when they're oftentimes you hear about studies that suggest something, and then when they do further studies to investigate it, then those things are overturned, and it's clearly not caused by it. So anyways, the book talks about cancer, diabetes, blood sugar, and like I mentioned before, it's a very personal experience for Dr. Boz. It's kind of baby boomer oriented because Dr. Boz's parents are baby boomers, and she realizes after learning about the ketogenic diet how ill-informed that generation was about diet. And this is again sort of implicates high carbohydrate diets in many of the health problems that are very common these days. You know, that's kind of why I hate to hear things summed up as like a SAD or standard American diet or a Western diet or whatever, because it's a global phenomenon. There's cancer, infertility, obesity, type 2 diabetes, and all kinds of other related diseases which appear to be caused by carbohydrates in particular. And, you know, I bump into vegans online all the time that adamantly defend this position and tell me I need to watch Forks Over Knives or whatever. And of course, they're not going to watch The Magic Pill or Search for the Perfect Human Diet or Fathead or any. They're not going to do that. They're completely convinced. Usually, at least the ones that talk to me, anyway. So, anyways, I don't turn down any of the vegan oriented material. I read it, listen to it, examine it, and I track down as many studies as I can. I cover as many books as I can, because I don't want to be in an echo chamber. I don't want to be in my own little bubble. I want to take in as much information as possible. And just like ketogenic kind of evolved into keto and fasting, and then that evolved into carnivore for me, I can only imagine there's another evolution behind that in perfecting the diet. But for me, carnivore works for me on a lot of levels, and it also makes sense from an ancestral standpoint to me, because when you look at the archaeological evidence, you find out that man basically followed animals around eating them. And we did that for the last 2 million years. And then there's only evidence of us eating any plants. It kind of shows up 50,000 years ago. And while we did eat plants, we apparently got the bulk of our calories from eating animals. And I know people don't want to believe that. They want to think we're all hunter and gatherers who probably mostly ate plants, but there's been plenty of societies that existed where there just weren't even edible plants available, and they've been thriving all this time. And there's many examples out there. So I'm not gonna rehash the whole thing right now in this video, but because this video is about the book any way you can. And so I highly recommend this book. I hope people check it out. I hope people pass it around. I hope people with high blood sugar and diabetes and insulin resistance and leptin resistance and cancer, I hope you guys get a chance to read this book. I think it's going to help a lot of people with autoimmune diseases as well. So anyways, thanks again for listening. Please subscribe, check out my other videos, give them a like, pass on links to other people so they can check it out, and definitely keep learning. You know, the best thing we can do is keep passing information around and educate each other, because, you know, we're not going to learn this in school, at least not anytime soon. The data comes out continually, so we have to keep learning. We have to keep reading the studies, and we have to keep an open mind, because this is very different from how we were raised. So thanks again, and hope to be talking to you soon.